Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to our September roundtable. And today we'll be covering the topic of global digital donor acquisition. So with us today is our guest, James from Mindwize. I am Heather. I'm the executive director of the U.S. Foundation for Chaplain York. James and I will say a little bit more about ourselves in a moment, but I thought it might be helpful as we get started to just go around and allow each of you to introduce yourselves and maybe say, share a little bit about what you do and one thing you're hoping to learn from today's roundtable. So that way we can really be tailoring our conversation around you. We want this to be interactive and more of a dialogue than just a one-directional lecture. So we're really curious to hear what your expectations and hopes are for today. So why don't we start with Annabella, because you're the first one I'm seeing in the rotation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annabella. I just took on a position as a partnerships and fundraising manager for African Gifted Foundation. It's a foundation that actually funds a STEM school for African girls in Ghana. And so the head of the foundation is in the UK, and we are just now opening a branch here in the US. And so I'm just hoping to just get some tidbits on how to actually make sure we are able to secure the type of partnerships that we can here in the US, and so that we'll be able to help the girls back in Africa, basically.
And Annabella, can I clarify, is that partnerships that you're thinking in terms of it as sort of corporate or institutional partnerships, or also individual donors, from lower level individual donors?
Yeah, right now, I'm thinking of everything that you just said, from individual donors to corporate sponsorships, because we are just trying to get people to get to know about the African Science Academy and the good work that they are doing. And so, yeah, everything that you just talked about.
Okay, cool. I think today it's fair to say we'll focus on the individual fundraising side of things, and probably less so on the institutional. So good to hear that you're interested in that.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Rasheda, can I throw it over to you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Rasheda Moore. I am the manager of annual giving at the Land Trust Alliance. It's a US-based organization serving land trusts across the United States to support private voluntary land conservation. In my current role, I'm mostly focused on entry-level and mid-level giving. And because of the age of our donors at this organization, we depend heavily upon direct mail. However, as I think about my own personal career trajectory and where I want to go from here, which is the reason why I'm on this call, I know that digital fundraising is increasingly an opportunity for younger donors. And I think I have an opportunity to just make investments in digital fundraising. And also I'm very interested in working for an international organization with a wider, deeper impact in things that are, close to my values. And so as I look at new opportunities, I'm very interested in these discussions, becoming familiar with these discussions.
Excellent. Cool. Yeah, I think a little bit of diversification from direct mail is helpful, just as I think just channels start to shift in general, but I think there is, as you said, the generational shift as well with donor behavior. So good things to be looking at and be proactive in developing those strategies rather than having to be reactive later on down the line. Great. Beth.
Hi, thanks. I'm Beth Korczynski, and I'm Director of Philanthropy at an organization called Turgar International. We are a meditation community that supports secular meditation instruction and training, and we also have are affiliated with a Buddhist teacher, so there are some Buddhist groups as well. It's probably about 60% secular, 40% Buddhist, and we're organized in the United States, but we have meditation groups and communities in 30 different countries, and the relationship between us and those groups has been more informal. We're about 10 years old now, and we're actually just looking into a way, like a kind of a subsidiary affiliate model. But I will say that one of our goals has been to increase the participation of donors outside of the US on a individual donor basis. For many years, more than 90% of our donors were US based. And over the last few years, especially with more online programming, that's changed a lot. And so far this year, we're about 47% of our donors are outside of the US. We'll see how that ends up, by the time the end of the year fundraising is completed, but that's a big shift for us. So we want to, I think, understand the differences between reaching donors in the US and outside of the US, but also we want to make sure that we're presenting ourselves in an international way and not just making it only easy for US based donors to make a gift.
Beth, do you have any idea what has driven that shift to, okay, maybe on December 31st, it's going to look a bit different, but right now it sounds like almost 50% is still quite a shift, 50% to international. Do you know what's driving that?
Yeah, it's our shift to online programming. So because of COVID, we had to cancel all the in-person events, and instead everything's online, including little retreats or workshops or training or whatever. And so we've actually inadvertently increased access significantly. A lot of people have told us that ability to travel or be away from their children or whatever has hindered them from taking part in events. So now we have a much, and we can be in more places. You could only physically be in so many countries with events. So I think that opening up of that is the main thing that's done it. People just now have opportunities to connect with us that they didn't have before.
And has your total fundraising increased, or has it stayed around the same but just shifted a bit?
So it's increasing. It's we're still sort of young enough and small enough in fundraising. We're at about $1 million in fundraising, but we also have events income, so it brings us up to about 3 million total. But we're still small enough that it's a little volatile, if you know what I mean. Like, we get one big gift from an individual donor, and it can skew the percentage rate from year to year. So I would say overall it's increasing, but not necessarily at a smooth rate.
Yeah, got it.
Great, thank you. Kayla.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Kayla Barbeau. I am a foundation manager for foundation giving at Second Harvest Canada, which is Canada's largest food rescue organization. So basically, since the start of the pandemic, we have kind of set into motion, which was supposed to be a 3-year plan into a few weeks to expand nationally. And with that, we're just trying to procure more donors throughout Canada. And obviously, I'm based in Toronto. Not obviously, but I'm based in Toronto. So just to kind of be able to develop those relationships and really kind of hone in on our presence in the communities we operate in. I think obviously digital fundraising is a huge proponent of that and will be. So I just kind of wanted to network and see what the hubbub was about. And yeah.
Great. Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Sherman. I work at Teachers College at Columbia University. I'm Director of Development there. I oversee our annual giving efforts, and we are in a couple of transitions at the college itself. We are moving from a traditional annual fund model to where we've really focused our fundraising around unrestricted giving to more of an annual giving model where we are encouraging gifts across the college regardless of fund. So that's one transition. And we are also moving from a multi-channel approach to a more omni-channel approach. And I know that the difference there is nuanced, but better weaving together our direct mail, phone, and digital efforts so that there's a more cohesive brand and feel to our fundraising campaigns on the annual giving level. We have an older donor base that's committed to direct mail. However, this past year particularly, while we saw certainly growth in the digital area in prior years, this past year was where that growth kind of really boomed. No doubt the COVID pandemic had an impact. It's really changed just how we do life on a day-to-day basis in the digital and virtual platforms. So that no doubt had an impact on our giving, as well as our engagement. We were able to touch alumni around the world through our virtual events and things like that in ways that we hadn't been able to do before. So we see opportunities to grow the international donor pool. We do have a few things in place that, for example, we have a separate international giving form for people to give if they're living overseas versus our regular online form. We have information for donors from certain countries who perhaps have to follow certain give through certain foundations or follow certain giving protocols over how they can give to the US from a legal standpoint, I guess would be the right terminology. But we also want to speak to our international alumni the right way and be respectful of their cultures and of their experiences. And so that's partly what drew me here as well as learning more about digital fundraising and digital channels and how we can use all those to bolster new donors. We also need to work on attracting our recent graduates. That's a challenge everywhere in higher ed. The younger generation of graduates is not necessarily giving in the same way that their older alumni counterparts would do. So we're brainstorming different ideas to engage our younger alumni. I'm in higher ed. I also firmly believe there are good lessons to draw on from the nonprofit world. The nonprofit world is creative and in ways and in a lot of ways more forward-facing sometimes than academia can be, which can sometimes get a little academic. I'll leave it at that. So that's what brings me here.
Great. Thanks so much for being with us. Yeah, I think for a lot of higher ed, it was an opportunity to reconnect with alumni who had dispersed themselves globally using digital channels. So good way to grow relationships that way. And I was thinking with Kayla's point too, of being in a kind of a food security organization during the pandemic, that's also a time where you really had opportunity to reach and to grow because there was such a need. So I think two different ends of the charitable spectrum, both in higher ed and in kind of the direct service areas, but both of them existing in an environment where the need and desire to connect and build those donor relationships digitally was, I think, very prime. So great, Tim.
Hey, Heather, James, and everyone. Great to be here and say hello. Tim Wolf, I'm Director of International Development at University of Minnesota Foundation, so in higher ed, kind of a small team in a big pie of development work in our large university, focused on primarily alumni outside the US engagement and just dealing with the pandemic and trying to keep learning what's working as we're further along in this situation from colleagues. So unfortunately, I apologize in advance. I have to bail a little early from today's session, but look forward to hearing ideas and sharing, contribute to the discussion. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Natalie.
Hi, so I'm Natalie. I'm based in Senegal. I'm currently working on a consultancy for a US-based organization that has no experience whatsoever with digital fundraising. They have an international remit, staff that works remotely around the world, but they receive a lot of funding from specific fee-for-services or also from foundations. But in this consultancy that I'm doing, I'm helping them structure their fundraising team so that we know what kind of donor segment they should focus on, what kind of team and investment they should have. And I found that they might have a little seed there that we can develop for digital fundraising. And I saw James, your session last Thursday, and I thought it was very clear, super well structured, almost like an invitation for me to convince them to go into digital fundraising. So I'm here to sort of list my argumentation to encourage them down that route. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I don't know if this is a closed group because I don't know any of you except from Helen Maynard, but I don't think she's there. But yeah, just to say I'm happy to be here.
We are glad to have you. No, this is an open group and all are welcome. So we're thankful for everyone who's able to join today.
Thank you.
So a little bit about me, as I mentioned at the top, I'm the executive director of the U.S. Foundation for Chapel in New York. I've worked in the philanthropic space for the last 21 years. I've worked in higher ed. I worked in faith-based organizations, human service organizations, INGOs. So kind of had a breadth of experience within the sector, most of it in roles like vice president for advancement or development. I've also been an ED of smaller institutions. So now in my role at Chapel in New York, what we specialize in is we have a global network, and our role is really to help facilitate international fundraising, both through our family of foundations to enable organizations to receive gifts from outside their country where they're based, and also providing fundraising services to help organizations be effective in their fundraising efforts internationally. And with that, I would hand it over to James to introduce himself. I won't do it justice.
Thanks a lot, Heather. I'll be quick in my introduction. So yeah, look, really happy to be here. Like Heather said, yeah, open group. I had met Heather and Helen before, but none of you are the good people. So so great to be here with you. I am I'm now a senior fundraising consultant. I was previously the director of digital, but now the senior fundraising consultant at Mindwize, which is a full service fundraising agency based in the Netherlands. And we do digital campaigns for organizations everywhere. So we've got clients in the Americas, Australia, all through Europe, obviously, Asia, Thailand, Hong Kong, the Nordics, lots of different places. Not so many in South America. That's one place, not yet, but otherwise everywhere. And yes, I do a lot of digital campaigning and fundraising. And prior to that, I worked at another full service fundraising agency based in Australia, which is where I'm from. I hope none of you are French. We're not popular with the French this week. My wife's French. And prior to that, I worked at a couple of nonprofits, including Amnesty International, where I did digital campaigning for 5 years, and ActionAid before that. So yeah, I think Amnesty was a really interesting basis for, so I did that before I went to the agency side, and I was bringing together sort of, I was working on digital campaigns for various different objectives. So for fundraising, yes, but also for activism and engagement and human rights campaigns and awareness. And all of that fed into my approach now to what I see, how I see digital fundraising. I think we'll talk a bit about that. So yeah, I've worked with lots and lots of different nonprofits, not so much higher ed. I've got to say that from the outset. So that's not my specialty. Luckily, we've got a couple of people on the call who are very experienced in higher ed. But I also think some of the, I think Tim, I think it was your point. I think like, I know maybe it was maybe it was, I'm going through my notes, maybe it was Susan's point that maybe there are some things that can kind of be repurposed and, you know, from nonprofits, you know, some of the strategies and principles that we'll talk about. And I'm really keen for a flexible session. I think Heather will sort of direct us, and then yeah, happy to go anyway. I've got a whole lot of stuff that I can share, so we'll just see where it takes us.
Great. And I mean, I know when I was first, I shouldn't even say when I was first working in fundraising, for years working in the fundraising space, when someone would talk about digital donor acquisition, I think instant reaction was like, oh, you mean buying an email list and sending out blast emails and trying to reach prospective donors in that way. And that's not what we're here to talk about today. It's digital donor acquisition has taken on a lot of different forms since then. And I think, I mean, we covered a lot of those just in our introductions and thinking about how online events and offerings have been able to serve as a pipeline for prospective donors. And there are a lot of other potential acquisition methods as well. One that I've seen used quite effectively through a variety of methods, and I think can be applied pretty universally to whatever type of organization you're in, is the two-step method. And I know James has a lot he can say on that. And you might wonder, well, what do you mean by two-step? But I think as he sets it up, you may already be doing this and haven't referred to it as such. Or what I'm hoping is it will set off some ideas about what you have to offer as that first step that can then lead to the second step. But James, I would let you.
Yeah, absolutely. Heather or Helen, can I share can you enable screen sharing for me, please?
I'm sure I can.
Absolutely. So while we're getting that sorted, well, we'll start with by naming a few different models. But to me, the two-step, like there are a couple of people who are just interested in getting exposure to some of the basic concepts of online fundraising. And to me, the you know, this two-step approach that Heather referred to is really fundamental. It's for a number of reasons, which I'll unpack. So thank you for that. Yeah, so like Heather was saying, you know, there are different models. So like, okay, let's start with the basics. There are different, okay, an email blast to a purchase list, that is a tactic. And I would say that probably it's a rather hopeful stab at a directed donation campaign, where it's to me, like here we're looking at a bunch of different models, and directed donation is the most straightforward. I've got a diagram and some examples later on, but we're really just we're talking about donor acquisition. So I'm talking about reaching out and acquiring new donors to donate to you for the first time. So, you know, usually I'd be talking about advertising and trying to qualify audiences and ways to qualify them. Cold email lists, yeah. If you've got a quality list, it might work, but yeah. So here, two-step, I'm going to explain that in a second. Directed donation, crowdfunding, a very specific type of fundraising, peer-to-peer and community events. You know, some organizations make enormous money off those, but they're, you know, a big peer-to-peer event is a lot, you know, so say a run for this or a swim for that, or a, you know, cycle 1,000 kilometers in September, that's a big peer-to-peer event. And some organizations are making millions off that, but that's a lot of work, and it's a multi-year project to build those things up and optimize them. And then online events and galas. And yeah, like these two-step and direct donation are the things that I can speak to most. And also I would argue that particularly two-step is the one that you can scale. So a lot of fundraisers from nonprofits are looking for, you know, there's a traditional base in channels like direct mail, and maybe depending on where you're from, a lot of markets face-to-face. So on the street, you know, recruiting donors on the street. And that can be a way that those can be ways that you can scale donor acquisition and really build a long-term, sustainable fundraising base. The question is, what's the equivalent of that online? Because directed donation is hard work. Like, it's hard to advertise to people you don't know and who don't know you and get a donation. That's really hard. But TwoStep is I'll explain why. That is a way that we can bring people into the community and bring them along a journey to donation.
And I just want to jump in too to say, if you have questions as we're going through, feel free to put them in the chat or just speak. We do want this to be interactive and be a conversation. So as questions come up, please don't feel you need to hold them until the end. We're happy to take those live time as well.
Absolutely. I'm happy with just speak. Like, I'll get on a roll. So just talk over me and I'll stop. So I'm happy with that. So yeah, TwoStep campaign, what is it? So the step one is a non-financial engagement. It's lead generation, and more people are familiar with the term lead generation. I'm not in love with lead generation, because I think when someone engages with your cause, calling them a lead is a bit shallow. It doesn't really describe their emotional connection to your cause and their values alignment. Anyway, a non-financial engagement, we'll unpack what those are. Then a supported journey, some form of supported journey. So in the lead generation step, they hand their details over to you. Then there is a supported journey. We'll look in more detail at those. And then step two is donor conversion. That's the basic of a two-step campaign. Not too hard, right? And for that step one really important thing to take away is there are many different forms of lead generation. I hear people say, when I start talking to them about lead generation from nonprofits, they say sometimes, oh, we can't do petitions because that doesn't suit our cause, or we can't do a survey or whatever. There are lots of different mechanics. So you can call that a mechanic or a type of an action type. I'll run through a few examples here. I've got millions of examples of these things that we've done. So this is a brochure, and our friend from the meditation organization, like this space. This is what I call a value exchange, right? So it's a value exchange. It's a brochure about thrombosis, and this is really useful resource for people who have thrombosis or who love someone who have thrombosis, or are just starting to think that they might have thrombosis. We can offer them information that is truly, truly beneficial to them, that they would want to get, and they can download it in exchange for their details. That's a value exchange. And then we've given them something, of value, and that is a great first step in the relationship towards becoming a donor. So yeah, any type of organization, I think the universities can think of this as well. Like, if you have useful and specialized knowledge locked up in your organization, then you can offer that, and you've got an addressable market of people who want that, then already you have a strong lead generation idea there. This is a quiz where you find out which Australian animal you're like. So you go through, and so this is obviously a bit more fun, but it's also educational, because as you went through, you answer questions like, where would you sleep? Under a rock, here, there. What sort of food would you eat? How would you attract a partner? By doing a dance or whatever. So it's fun, but it also, you would get answers as you go through that would educate you and bind you a bit more to this cause, which is Bush Heritage, which does conservation work. This one works quite well. This is a game. A bit more costly to set up, but this is from the Heart Foundation in the Netherlands. You go through and do these game levels, and at the start and in between each game level, you get little factoids of information to educate you and bind you to the cause. This is a petition. This is a typical strong petition. I've done a lot of work with Soy Dog, who are, for mine, in the nonprofit space, one of the masters of international donor acquisition. They are they would say, my friend Leonard Coyne, who works for Soy Dog, he would say, we're a glorified dog pound in Thailand. And they also, so they do work against the dog meat trade all around Southeast Asia, and they also save sick dogs on the streets in Thailand and bring them back to the shelter. They run these petitions, or we run these petitions for them, and we've acquired more than a million email addresses, hundreds of thousands of donors for these guys since 2014. So really big scale stuff. This is what I would call a hand raiser. Hopefully you can see that. I've got, yeah. I'll show you another example of a hand raiser in a minute, but it's a paw, we called it a paw raiser because it's for Animals Asia. So here it's, you're basically making we're inviting you to make a value statement, to say, yes, I agree with this. You put your hand up and you sign your name. There's not a theory of change like with a petition where we're calling for a policy change, but still it can be quite powerful because we invite people to say, yes, I agree with this value statement. And then we can guide them through and say, well, okay, you agreed with that. Will you help fund us? So yeah, and there are, I mean, I've got, sorry, that's my daughter there. I've got lots and lots more examples. You know, this is another great example of of what I'd call a hand raiser and a send a message. This is for a cute kid. This is for Orbis International. And it's basically saying, there is a pre-written message saying, yes, Marla, you deserve healthy eyes. I believe all children should be free from avoidable blindness, etc. Sign the message to Marla now. And you're putting your hand up and saying, yes, I agree with this. And that's, again, a wonderful first step into this cause for people. And you see why, you know, if you think about what, or this one, a petition calling on Sweden to respect or to fulfill the commitment it made when it signed the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. These things aren't like, someone who signs this, they're not a lead to me. They have emotionally bonded with your cause and committed to your cause in a way. And we need to think in those terms if we're going to convert them as effectively as possible. So I want to.
I would just jump in on that too, just to say I'm a big behavioral economics, behavioral science nerd. And there's a lot of research behind that as to why you might think, why does a hand raiser matter? You're not calling them to do something the way you are in a petition. They're not getting something from you as if you're providing them with material. Why is that hand raiser important? But it really builds alignment. And it's that first yes from that person saying, yes, I agree with you. Yes, we are similar and we both believe these things together. So it's very similar to that effect of signing a petition where you're building alignment and you're building momentum towards the mission with this individual. The same thing with the brochure. You might think, well, they're just signing up to get the brochure. What does that mean? Well, it builds addition to, again, it's similar to a hand raise, and they're showing that they identify with the work that you're doing, that there's shared interest and value there. But it also sets off a bit of reciprocity as well, that you've given them something now. So it almost has a priming effect that they're more likely to say yes later on down the road, when you would be at a point where you'd be asking them to give something back to you. So all these little things that may seem simple or thinking, well, why does that matter? But there's all these other layers to it beyond just what you see in that click or that form filled out or submitted. It's not just a transaction. There's a lot of alignment building and relationship building and community building that's taking place internally between you, your organization, and this individual. So just wanted to chime in with that as well, why this matters.
I love how you put that, Heather. We didn't discuss that before this. So yeah, it's cool to see how aligned we are on that. If anyone's interested in unpacking that a bit more, Cialdini, I pronounce the name Cialdini anyway. I think it's Robert Cialdini. I can't remember what the book is, but he's developed a whole lot of framework around some of those phenomena and techniques that Heather was just referring to. So like people's need for consistency. And you know, if you think about like asking someone to give you money who you don't know yet, it's like a big ask. It's up here, and these little steps. And so if we just advertise to them to ask them to give us money, we go from down here, and that's step all the way up here. Whereas if we're bringing them in on a low level non-financial engagement, and then have a multi-step process of engagement and conversation and relationship building with them, it's stepping them up to that. And yeah. So I'm going to unpack, I want to look at what the supported journeys are, because this is when it starts getting a bit like, this is when we start to unpack channels and you start to see, and like maybe this will provoke some questions about channels, which I'm really keen to take. And we can go any way from there. So like what do the nuts and bolts of these two-step things that we're talking about look like? So here's a simple one. Facebook advertising, like in the type of for nonprofit campaigning, there is nothing like Facebook. And when I say Facebook advertising, I mean Facebook, Instagram, and different placements across those things. There's nothing like it for return right now. Well, there's search, right? But search works in a different way. Search captures interest, like pre-existing interest, whereas Facebook, like social, lets you reach out to people. And the targeting options that you have in Facebook advertising are incredible. One day the show will end, you know, but we're not there yet. Like we're still getting fantastic value out of it. So here's a simple supporter journey. We advertise to people who we don't know yet. We drive them to a lead form. This is something you can set up within, some of you probably use these, but you can set this up within Facebook. No need to set up a website. No need to set up a landing page. You can set this lead form up within Facebook. It opens up, you know, on the phone or whatever, and it pre-fills people's data that Facebook has, which means it's much better for conversion than something where they have to tap all their details in. So that's really nice. Okay, they cite, this might be a petition or a little quiz or a, you know, whatever. They submit that, and after they submit it, they might receive a thank you email, and they might go into a conversion calling program. Now, or they might go on an email journey. They might receive retargeted advertising, or all these things. In the States, across all the markets that I've worked in, I believe that telemarketing for monthly donor conversion is less of a phenomenon and works less there, you know, in a whole lot of other markets, like across Europe and across, you know, in some Asian countries, I can say in Australia, and I believe in Canada as well. I think someone can correct me there if I'm wrong, but I know of a company that does well in Canada, Stratcom. Phone conversion works well for monthly giving, straight off the back of lead generation, but I believe in the States it's a bit different. I don't know why that is. Anyway, so that's a fairly simple and straightforward supported journey, and it can look something more like this, right? This is a typical soy dog. We often have a three-step campaign with the soy dog campaign, actually, where we have a petition, and then we ask for a one-time gift, and then we ask for a monthly gift. Here we'll just call it a two-step campaign. We've got 2 pages set up. We drive traffic through social advertising, yes, but also through organic social. We'll set up search campaigns, and we might even, if there are people we want to re-engage, like lapsed donors or people who have never given to us again before, but they're on our email list, we might also email them and drive them to the petition because it re-engages them, and then we can put them on a conversion journey after as well. So a number of channels driving to that page. After someone signs that petition, they go on. There's a number of different conversion pathways. One is this email one, where there are a number of emails. I'm happy to talk in more detail to this if you want. And each email does a bit of a different thing. You know, the first couple are more about reinforcing the impact that they've had and building the relationship a bit more, building that emotional bond with the beneficiaries. And then we start asking them for money, and we ask a couple of different ways if they don't give. We might ask them for money directly on the thank you page. If you can put a form on your thank you page, it's much, much more effective than having a button to a form. So you sign the petition, you take the survey, and you hit submit on the final submit, and you land on the confirmation and thank you page, and there's a donation form right there. That is like chalk and cheese compared to landing on a thank you page and there's a button saying, will you click here to go to a donation page? It's much easier for people to donate. And if you can pull the detail, sorry, I'm riffing a bit here, but if you can pull the details through from, let's say they've signed a petition, let's not make them fill those details in again. Let's take their name and email address and put them in the form again, so it's really easy for them. Someone's raised their hand.
Hi, James, it's me, Natalie. Sorry, I know I'm interrupting you. You were so excited talking about this.
That's what this is about. Please do. Yeah.
I'm interested to know about what happens in the back office, because it seems so detailed. But what kind of system do you need to be able to follow up on all of this? What is the minimum team that you would need? Does one person do all of this, or would you have someone to create the content and the, you know, the messages, the petitions, etc., and someone to analyze, you know, who is answering? Can you just tell us a little bit about how it happens in the kitchen there?
Yeah, yeah, and like, yes, okay. It's a little tricky because, okay, yeah, I'm just thinking about how to. So I'm from an agency, right? So like we all know that. And for the last 7 or 8 years, I've worked at agencies that do this for people. So I like, so you can outsource it, and there can just be one person. Ideally, there can be one person who oversees this. It's got to be a flexible and cluey fundraiser, like someone who wants to get into the data, someone who can handle talking about these different channels and can push the agencies and diagnose. And so they can handle talking to a phone agency about what's going on there, and they can handle talking to the agency that's managing all these digital channels, and they can engage with what's going on and the results. Yeah, so like a good flexible fundraiser, but they don't have to build it all themselves. If that's the thing about with an agency, you know, you can outsource all of that. And so because when we're looking at this, you know, when we're looking at this, there are a number of different disciplines. But Natalie, in your case, right, your organization that you're representing is like just considering taking the first step. So you would look more like that. You would look more at this model, because that you don't need to go from 0 to hero. You know, this is what to do. And in fact, this is strongly what I'd recommend to anyone who's starting lead generation. It's also like, I would only invest in a campaign like this, which might cost tens of thousands of dollars to set this up. I would only invest in that once I've tested it on that, because that's very cheap to. So what we typically do when we, our typical model at Mindwize is we work with an organization. We recommend that we do a test campaign where we, especially in a market like the States, say where it's a big market, you know, 300 whatever million people, we brainstorm lots of different ideas for lead generation, and we choose 3, and then we run those 3 in a multivariate test at the same time in the same market to the same audiences, but separate segments of them. And that gives us data. And from there, we make data-driven decisions on what to roll out. And then you can model it, and then you know what you're dealing with. So then you can consider spending more. So back to your question, like, what do you need? So Facebook advertising, like, or any type of online advertising is, if you want to do it well, like it's a specialist area. So there's not like a, you can get into it, but if it's someone who's spread, never pretend that someone who's spread across a whole lot of different areas and answering to 10 different people is going to be able to take on a Facebook campaign and run it well. You can't. You need space to get into that, to learn and to specialize. So that is one area. Doing things like Facebook lead forms, that's not difficult. So yeah, that's not difficult to set up. It's more about understanding that the universe of Facebook advertising, all the targeting options, the best practices with optimization, the creative options, what's best for direct response in ads, all these sorts of things. So setting up, like most organizations can send an email, setting up an automated email, there's a bit of tech behind that. So you need to get your data from where it's captured, which in this case is the lead form, which is quite easy, but you need to get it over to your email platform, whatever that is. There may be a native integration between Facebook and your email platform, which you can set up, or you might need to use a third-party service like Zapier. So Zapier is an integration service that lets platforms talk to each other and lets you take data from here and send it over there. Again, that doesn't take a developer to set up, but it takes someone who has time and is cluey with online platforms and is used to doing that. Like, don't get someone who's done direct mail all their life and expect them to be able to set up Zapier, you know. And then with phone, if you were doing phone in your market, like, again, that's not, so you need a phone agency, you're not going to do that yourself like that. So, and then you just need to have good data practices. So establish the template, establish the frequency of sending data to them. You might even program that. That would, you might send it straight into the phone agency's dialer. That would require a developer, but you can also just send them leads twice a week. So download them from Facebook and send them over twice a week. So that's kind of it. So depending on your resources and how much, like, if you're one person, you're doing 10 different things, you might say, I'm going to go to an agency. I'm going to tell them to keep it simple, but I'm still going to outsource this because I can't manage it myself. If you do have an online person who's cluey and flexible, they might be able to manage it. Maybe they'd outsource parts of it, but they might be able to own the whole thing. Yeah. Something like this, there's a lot more that, if you're building custom web landing pages, you're capturing data, you're setting up like multi-email journeys, maybe with different conditions. So you need to program those. You need a digital team capacity if you were trying to do this, and like a team, if you were trying to do this in-house.
And I think the other thing to note as well is, before you start, have these pieces in place so that when that first step is taken, you're able to quickly follow up, because that time is in the essence while that person is still excited about what they've done with you, while they still have that positive feeling of engaging with you, whether that was a petition or a hand raise or whatever that was. There's a limited window where they're going to stay that enthusiastic. So you want to be able to have that follow-up second step within that.
Or even remember what they've done. Like I've worked with the two agencies I worked with have both had phone agencies. I worked very closely with phone rooms for a long time. If it's too long, you'll call someone up and they'll say, I don't know who you are. I never signed that petition. And you're like, well, you did, but they don't even remember. So absolutely, I've seen some big, I'm thinking of a big environmental organization, like big international, one of the big names, who launched a petition on a certain subject in Australia, and it went viral. It just went nuts. It was just the right petition at the right time. They got like 200,000 leads in, and they had no plan. They had absolutely no plan. And then they got into internal arguments about it and who owned the data, ridiculous. And, 4 months later, still nothing had been done with the leads. That is they had thousands of monthly donors in those leads, and they just let them go. So that's absolutely, like, take that. That's got to be one of the top 3 points. Plan out these supported journeys, whether it's a simple or a more complex one. Don't hit go until you know exactly where the data is going and when, and it's all set up.
Yeah, I've seen organizations start these and say, well, we'll do the first step, we'll collect all the data, we'll spend some time analyzing it, and then we'll devise our follow-up strategy. And you've stopped yourself before you've even started at that point.
That's it. Throw it away and start again. Yeah. So and there's no right with these two. We've looked at a very simple option, low investment, a complex option, high investment. There's no right or wrong. It's just contextual. It depends on your context and what your aims are and where your organization's at. But what I said, going back to what I said, test. It's that I don't know if you're familiar with the lean startup idea, the MVP. Like the idea of this book by Eric Ries, The Lean Startup, which has been hugely influential. Spend the minimum money you can to validate an idea that you have. So that's what this left end of the spectrum is about. Like we're going, okay, we think we've got a lead generation idea that our market is going to like. We're gonna test that in as cheap a way as possible and validate that. And as soon as you have a significant number of leads and a cost per lead, that's what the cost per lead is the North Star metric for lead generation. So as soon as you've got that, and then ideally you can have a donor conversion rate if you're calling or if you by email, but that's kind of what you need to know. I came to this model of testing the 3 different, brainstorming, testing the 3 different campaigns through harsh experience, through building big campaigns like this over on the right that me and clever excellent creative director and other people thought were a great idea and spending lots of money on the full journey and then launching it, and it just falls flat. So that's why you test a number next to each other, because one or two can fall flat, but one's probably going to work. Okay, so please just talk over. There are a couple of things in the chat. Were there? Oh yeah, cool, great. Yep, Cialdini, great. So I'm just going to keep going until someone stops me. So this is also a really important point about two-step campaigning. Let's say on the left is a direct donation campaign. You get 500 donors. That's great. On the right is a two-step campaign. We get our leads. We convert 500 to donors in the initial effort. That's great. But we also have this kicker, this big multiplier of all these people who are the blue and orange concentric circles, who didn't convert straight away, but they're future donors. That you should look at them as future donors, and also they're your email subscribers. They're people who can help you achieve other goals outside of fundraising if you have other objectives that are supported by having a big community. So but you should think of them as future donors. This slide, I'm just going to summarize by saying we did a study and we proved that with an organization we've been running two-step campaigning with for like a couple of years, 3 years. And we looked at when people compared to when they first come in as a lead, because we've been doing continuous lead generation. When did they first convert to a donor? We looked at all the people who converted to a donor and what was the distance between their date of lead generation and their date of first donation. There's a big spike at first because, of course, we're calling people in the first 4 weeks. They're on an email journey asking them to donate. But then there's this huge long tail that just keeps going and going and going. And what that proves is that these people who don't donate at first, they do keep converting if you keep speaking to them. That's it. Just keep them engaged, keep asking them for money with good fundraising appeals, etc. So with your direct to donation campaign, you don't have that. You've got 500 people, that's great. Then you've got 500 people to develop into the future. Whereas over here, you've got 10,000 or 15,000 people to develop into the future, including your people who converted straight up. Okay, I will talk. I'm just going to keep going. This is the direct donation model. Now, I've talked really badly about it, but it can work. It can sort of work. It can just be really hard graphs. So if you're starting, like, I don't know, some of you might have already had this experience. You'll put an ad together and put it out, ask people to donate, and no one does. And you'll spend $500 or $1,000 advertising it. This is an example of it. So we work with Orbis International month in, month out on their Facebook advertising for lots of different objectives, and one of them is fundraising. This is an example. I showed you Marla before, who's the little girl here. She is incredible for fundraising. And this is an example of a campaign that is working pretty well. It's working pretty well. It's not a immediate positive return, but we are bringing donors in who can then be developed. And it's the same as direct mail, right? Direct mail acquisition can actually be a positive return, yeah. But in a lot of markets, it's happening less and less. So you're more relying on monthly conversion of those direct mail donors to make it profitable in year 2, 3, 4, 5. So this looks really simple but there is, I would say behind this ad, there's a lot of, we'll look at targeting in a second, but there's also a really strong understanding of the placement and the direct response creative, and also the parameters of the Facebook advertising medium. So this is how the ad displays on mobile, which is how most people are going to view it. In last year, in a lot of markets, we saw a total flip in where people, like what device people converted to become a donor on. So it used to be where people would use mobile for browsing and discovery, but they would transact on a desktop or a laptop. Last year, we saw that flip in a lot of markets. So we get much better results in mobile-only campaigns in the States for Orbis International than we do on on automatic placement campaigns that include desktop and laptop. Hopefully that makes sense. So in this creative here, you've got really good direct response tactics. You've got emotion, you've got tangibility and specificity. They're lucky that they can say $25 helps pay for a surgery that transforms a child's life. So that's what we all should aspire to, you know, try to get that tangibility. It asks over and over again. It keeps focusing on the child, and it uses this basic stuff. Within Facebook, you can build slideshow. Like, it's better to you create stuff like this little moving slide, like single image slideshow. You create this stuff within Facebook now. So it's good to go into, there's a tool called Creative Hub, if you haven't used that before, and you can play with all sorts of media tools that they make available for different sorts of slideshows and things. And also, like, keeping it's got a firm understanding of where you're going to truncate. That's really important. That's a cardinal sin. I see a lot of people's Facebook creative, they write it in a Word document and then they throw it in Facebook, and it's like the punchline comes after the see more. You know, we don't have a see more because we wrote it within Creative Hub. So we wrote it just fit there before it would go to a fourth line and truncate. And we wrote this Save a Child site now below just so it fits just in before getting truncated below the image. Okay, I'm going to just, we're at time. What happened? I'm going to talk, I'm just going to throw some stuff out there about social targeting. I'm happy to go, for anyone who wants to stay on for a little while, I'm happy to stay on for a little while. If we can have this. So this is just a screenshot. Again, I'm going to social media, Facebook advertising, because it really is where the return is now when you're talking about reaching out to, and in like push advertising, interruption advertising, not search, not pull advertising, but when you're trying to reach out to people and define audiences and interrupt their day and get them and pull them towards you, Facebook advertising is where it's at right now. And there in this summary, there are a whole lot of different targeting tactics. There's on the next slide, which you can all have this stuff. There's some summary of it, but I'll talk about what we've got. Lookalikes. Lookalikes are really powerful, right? If you've got a significant group of donors, you need a sizable audience, seed audience, for which to make a lookalike from. And the bigger that audience is, then the more significant and reliable their characteristics are, and the more we can create a reliable lookalike audience that share those characteristics. I hope that makes sense. If you get 100 people, there's going to be more variability and it's going to be less reliable seed audience. So anyway, so we've got all lookalikes of all different ways of qualifying someone as a donor. So here we've got people who have visited the website in the last 180 days. Well, we want to create a lookalike of those people because those people are inherently interested, you know, in some way. Well, this is for a lead generation. So we're actually saying, okay, once we've got 1,000 leads in the door, we'll just create a lookalike of them because that is, these are people who, you know, signed the petition. So let's just find people who look like that. That's always, so interest-based, an interest-based audience. So this is Christianity, 40 plus. You can't target Christians in Facebook. You can't target people based on their sexuality, on their religious beliefs, etc. But you can target people who are interested in all sorts of things to do with the Bible and, you know, and Christianity. They're Christian, so we can do that. Lookalike of people who have engaged with you on Facebook or Instagram in the last 365 days. Again, people who have responded to something of yours on social media, they're qualified. More interest-based stuff, people who are interested in charities that are relevant to the cause. In this case, it was aid and development and human rights charities. Another one of those, child charities, rights and protection. Broad, sometimes it's always good. So Facebook claims that you should just create big, broad audiences, and Facebook AI will optimize over time to the characteristics that are going to deliver the best results. I would always test that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And so on and so on. Lookalike of your email list. So you can upload your email list and create a lookalike of that, or if you've got a donor list. So all these ways are really important tactics to understand if you do want to get into Facebook advertising, or if you're managing an agency. You need to speak this language, and you need to be able to make sure they're doing their job. I think that's like, and these apply to direct to donation or lead generation, or if you're running a peer-to-peer event year after year and you're reaching out to bring new people into it, you will also use these targeting tactics. Like, these are universal, these targeting tactics. You'll use these sorts of things in whatever sort of campaign that you're running. Any questions? Or Heather, do you have any direction or suggestions on that?
I think we could definitely take some questions if anyone has them. Hopefully this has been helpful in kind of seeing the compare and contrast between the direct to donate, which is basically just reaching out to ask someone to make a gift, versus the two-step, which is asking them to engage in a meaningful way with your mission or something based around your mission, and then following up with a request to donate. And seeing kind of the ripple effect of that, which I thought James's slide showed very well, and kind of the long tail that layer of interaction can have in growing your donor base.
Yeah, and Heather, sorry, I just want to hammer that idea home. You just sort of prompted me, like, and for those who are, early on in digital fundraising, but also just in digital, and like, you don't have much of an email list, there's not that much going on. You might have some social media, a Facebook page with like a couple of thousand fans or whatever. That's not big enough, right? It needs to be bigger. So there's not that much going on across the board with digital. The two-step, it gives you that growth as well, because you want a bigger email list. You need a bigger email list. Like, if you don't grow your email list, that's the game. Grow the email list, grow the social fan bases. Because over time, like you see, I speak to some charities that go, well, email, like we do direct mail, we get this reliable income, not for long, but we get this reliable income with appeals, and then we send an email out at the same time, we get nothing. And I'm like, well, we get a small amount. And I'm like, well, how big's your list? And they say, 3,000 or 5,000. That's, the vision must be many tens of thousands or 100,000. Like, that's what you need to be shooting for. And once you're there, when you ask those people to contribute to an appeal, there might be a low conversion rate, but it's a low conversion rate of 100,000. So, it's more significant. Now I'm going to shut up.
Are there any questions that we can answer? Yes, Rasheda.
Yes, James, thank you so much for this presentation. I think it gives a really good baseline understanding of the process. And, I appreciate that you gave us how to scale up from like the most basic up to something more sophisticated to meet lots of different people's budgets. I'm wondering if we're wanting to dive deeper into this process, are there any resources that you would recommend we go to? So, you're obviously an expert on this. If someone's like, I want to gain more of these type of expert skills like yourself, where would you send someone?
Great question. It's a funny little niche, digital fundraising, because like there's not actually, I saw on I haven't done any of these courses, but I saw a course by what looked to be some quite reputable names. One of them, Simon Scriver, who's a great internationally recognized fundraiser. He's not necessarily, I didn't perceive him as a digital specialist, but he's an excellent fundraiser, really highly recognized on Udemy. So I saw a course there, and that looked really comprehensive on digital fundraising, like really well structured, comprehensive. So I was about to say, I don't think there are many out there, but I did see that. So like there's also there's a fantastic organization called Moshianic. And they do fundraising coaching. Good friend of mine, Sean Triner, founded that. and yeah, they do like coaching, and one of the spaces they do is digital as well. Yeah, other than that, I think that would be a place to, those would be a place to start.
Thank you. I saw some things on Udemy. So
okay. Okay, yeah. One of them, yeah, keep an eye out for that name, Simon Scribe. That's the only one that I saw him and I was like, oh, okay, Simon's doing that. That must be pretty decent. Yeah. There are also, I've seen, there are just some, there are good agencies and out there that do digital fundraising, and some of them have they've published some good content online and have some resources. I don't have them to hand, but there is some good stuff out there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple of groups as well. Resource Alliance tend to do, they have a large annual event that they do, but they've been doing more forum type talks. And I think just kind of watching what topics they have done some good ones on digital in the past. So I would recommend them as well. But yeah, Udemy, I just put the link in the chat, and I can put Resource Alliance in there as well. There's also say I put this in the chat, but this is Influence. This is the book that we referenced earlier, which just from a fundraising perspective, I think it's helpful in understanding what builds connection, what drives people's motivations for engaging in a variety of different things, but a lot of it applies quite well to fundraising. So if you're interested in some, I think it's light reading, but that's just because I really get into it. But just learning something a little bit different that I think really can strengthen your fundraising, just as far as your understanding of donor mindset and motivations. It's a great book to read.
Yeah, I found it quite, I can't read dry stuff, and I found it quite accessible. Like it's, yeah, good examples, and it's entertaining.
Let me just put this other link in the chat, and then I think we can wrap up. But thank you all for tuning in today, for being part of this roundtable. If you have any follow-up questions, please do reach out. Let us know. We're happy if something comes to you later. You want to reach out via email, do so. But we hope to see you at a future roundtable. For Chapel in York, we have IFAB, which is our international fundraising online event coming up in November, which will be focused on major gift fundraising if you have any interest in that. Our next roundtable in October will be focused on legal and regulatory issues, which is not always the most exciting subject, but it's the one you realize you need to know when something happens. So it's good to know those things ahead of time before something happens. But just can't thank James enough. His expertise and I think enthusiasm on the topic today really was evident. So James, thank you so much for being with us today and talking about digital donor acquisitions. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks very much, Heather, and thanks to Chapel in York and to you guys for turning up. And yeah, if you do, just if you want to chat about anything, please do shoot me an email. My email address is just james@mindwize.nl. And yeah, happy to chat anytime.
Great. Well, thank you all. And the recording will be sent out as well. So if there's anything that you were taking notes and you missed, you'll have an opportunity to play it back. So.
Thank you very, very much. And James, you will be hearing from me.
Awesome. Okay.
Bye.
Looking forward to it.
Bye.
Thanks,
to all
everyone.
Of you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.